Joining us now, Democratic strategist and MS Now political analyst Basil Smikle, senior advisor to the Lincoln Project, Stuart Stevens, and president of Elevation Global Strategies and former vice president of the Pentagon Press Association, Kevin Barron. Stuart, I'll start with you. Republicans have repeatedly made this claim since the start of this administration that they have a mandate. I want to know how they can continue to make that case right now as the president just keeps doubling down on the very things his voters said they did not want.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I don't think we had a mandate to have gas prices go through the roof or mandate to threaten to destroy an entire country's civilization, the Persian Empire. I don't think we had a mandate to keep hiding the Epstein files. Look, I think what's happened here is something that we did inside the Republican Party. And we didn't realize it, at least I didn't realize it was happening when I was working in the party. And that is we evolved a system that rewarded compliance, that you got ahead by going along. And we punished those that were more individual, who spoke out, who were willing to break with the party. And if you do that decade after decade, I think it's like a genetic experiment. You end up with this extraordinarily compliant, weak group of senators and congressmen who, had you said to them that Donald Trump is going to threaten to annihilate another civilization, they would have laughed and said, of course that's never going to happen. But now it's happening. Or in us, the way that we're supporting Russia in this war. We have the vice president over there supporting Putin's candidate in Hungary. 90% of Republicans are against this, but they won't say anything. And I think it's just a collapse of a party unlike anything that we've seen in certainly modern political history.
Basil, I liked that phrase that Stu just used there as he was describing a history, a sort of culture of punishing people who are individuals or who speak out on certain issues. And I wonder what lessons you think Democrats may be learning from watching the Republican Party suffer in the way that it is right now. Just this morning, an attempt to pass the War Powers Resolution failed. And at times you hear people say, well, you know that it's going to fail. Republicans, they run everything, so stop trying, stop wasting our time on these efforts. But do you think Democrats actually have a moral and political imperative right now to keep raising the issue, bringing these things back out into the public eye to show their people that they're fighting?
Yeah, I certainly think there's a moral imperative to do that. And you have seen that mobilization when we look at all of the protests, whether it's King's protest, whether it was the anti-ICE protest, all of those are going in deeper and deeper into red areas, and they're having an impact. We saw that with the race to succeed Marjorie Taylor Greene yesterday or on Tuesday. I wish she had stayed in Congress because she could apply a lot of that fire and the concern that she has now actually in the legislature.
Sure, that's not something you would have said a year or two
I would never have said that a year ago. But this is the issue, right? That if you do have individuals who have, for whatever reason, have, as we would say in some corners of the community, a come to Jesus moment, and they come to a place where they say, you know what I'm seeing is not good. It's not great for the country. Maybe I need to stay in it and fight, and then decides to kind of come out and fight from the outside. Fine. But Democrats have to fight from the inside. They have to have an inside and outside game. And I think that's what you're seeing. The mobilization in the communities, the conversations around voter access because of the concerns with the midterm election, but also what little they can do legislatively, they've been doing, shutting down the government to be able to say, pay attention to this. And I think they were criticized for that initially, but quite frankly, it has worked.
Kevin, I'm curious how you think service members, but then also Republican members of Congress who represent and often say that they speak for, that they support veterans and service members, how they are all reading this moment. In particular, I've been thinking about it today because of the president's post earlier where he's, saying that basically our service members are resting and sort of taking a beat here. But then he mentions that there is another, quote, conquest that's on the horizon. It's unclear if that's a conquest in Iran or Karg Island or it is Cuba or Greenland. I guess it's anybody's guess. But how do you think they process that?
Well, whenever anybody asks me what do the troops think, I like to remind people the troops are not a voting bloc. They don't have one answer. The troops are supposed to reflect the United States, and so you'll get a variety of opinions. You'll get troops that probably hate Donald Trump and troops that love them, like you would anywhere else. When it comes to following your commander-in-chief, there's obviously a lot of concerns about the signal that comes from the commander through Hegseth, through the military uniform commands to say this is a legal order, this is a lawful order, and your job is to go carry it out and salute smart. So I don't think, you'll never know. It's very hard. There's some military publications have tried to poll the troops. It's hard to get a statistical sample that works and figure it out. So it's hard to go there. As for the Republicans, look, I've been covering Washington for 25 years, and I'm a little over this idea that there's 90% of Republicans, or there's some huge cobbler of Republicans who are against Donald Trump, and they're just keeping quiet. I don't believe it. And I don't believe it from what I see, because I'm watching people's actions. People like Senator Wicker, the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, who used to be known as a kind of a McCain moderate Republican. Well, Wicker's come out in support of this action. And he's just one of many Republicans on the Hill who, if they really were against it, could do things. And we know there's reasons why they aren't, perhaps. They're too afraid of their base. And if they thought it was politically safe to step out, they would step out. They'd have those town halls, but they don't. And so I think there's a lot of Republicans who support Donald Trump. There are a lot of MAGA people, Marjorie Taylor Greene. There's a difference between being a MAGA follower and a Trump follower. And so I think she's rare. And the headlines that are eagerly pointing out, look what she's saying. She's opposed to this. And Tucker Carlson is opposed to this. And Megyn Kelly's. Well, those are not Trump diehard sycophants. The people that love Trump are following him to the end of the earth like he predicted. And the polls are showing it. 70% of Republicans in all the polls up to a week ago are still supporting the war. 70%. So that doesn't reflect to me a hidden cabal of Republicans on the Hill who really hate this, but are just buying their time somehow.
To Kevin's point, the MAGA followers versus the Trump followers, Trump-specific loyalists. Stu, I want you to take a listen to some of the House Republicans who've been defending this president.
I support what the president is doing. We just need to press forward because, look, Iran's like a cancer. And sometimes the cure to cancer hurts, but the cancer has to be eliminated. And that cancer is Iran.
President Ronald Reagan may have pioneered the doctrine of peace through strength, but President Donald Trump is perfecting it.
The president, of course, as he's prone to do, used extreme rhetoric that, certainly forced a capitulation by the regime.
Stu, I get that the majority of Republicans are still very safely in Trump's camp. But I have to say, if you are someone who's worried about gas prices rising, you got a young kid who just graduated from college and is really worried about the job market and is having some trouble right now, you're not able to afford childcare. I'm not sure that you would love to hear a congressman who's supposed to represent you say, well, sometimes the cure to cancer hurts in reference to a war that no one came to justify to you. Congress had no involvement in. Do you think as they continue to double down, I guess, on this and I guess circle the wagons around the president here, that there is a risk that they're going to peel off? They're already losing a lot of the independents. They're already losing Hispanic communities. But are they going to start to peel off people who would have otherwise remained pretty loyal to Trump?
Yeah, like a lot of polls, when you get inside the numbers, it's very revealing. And consistently, those who are very much against the war are stronger than those who are very much for the war. And that intensity is really important. It's one thing to say, okay, I support the president. It's another, I am going to intensely support what he's doing. And I think that they're losing votes every day. And there's just really nothing about what Donald Trump is doing, I think, that appeals to people. You go out and you threaten to destroy a civilization. I mean, really? What? Who's for that? So what you have is a bunch of weak congressmen that they're trying to sort of curry favor by Donald Trump by saying they do this. But look, I agree with you. I don't think that Donald Trump hijacked this party. I think he revealed the party. Because, all my tribe in Bush world, when they said that when Trump first emerged, they said, we hijacked the party. And I said, man, I'd like to believe that. But the problem is, the hijacker is never popular on the plane. Nobody ever says, okay, we're going to go to Cuba, not grandma's. And Donald Trump is very popular. So you have to say that it's exactly right. The Republican Party is getting what it wants with Donald Trump. I think it's headed toward a historic defeat because there's not any positive message here. And what it's doing is not what it said it was going to do. And that's a terrible combination in politics. But it's going to be a long time, I think, before we see a sane center-right party in America.